within that society without any questioning and their entire lives. But some people have a question, why we have to live in this way or in that way when we were taught when we are child. We often have a question. And for many people, this question, why is it true? Why we have to follow the standard we learned when we are kid, can be a very serious question. And such people, not only in Buddhism, become a bodhisattva, means person who seek the truth. So when I had a question about the way of life I was taught in Japanese society, I became a bodhisattva. That means a way seeker, the person who is aspired to seek the way, to seek the truth, beyond what we are taught from our parents or teachers or society. And Shakyamuni Buddha was that kind of person. He, couldn't stay at his palace, and he left to seek the way. So, the first meaning of bodhisattva is person who seeks the way. That means the person has some question to the system of value or way of life he was, raised in. So here Okumura Roshi is talking about Buddhist practice because he was a Buddhist monk or priest. But when he talk about Buddhism or Buddhist practice, it's very important for him. He doesn't mean religious organization, but the teaching of Buddha. As I often said, I first, read his book when I was 17 years old. The title of the book was Self or Jiko. Or Self. And subtitle was what in English? Religion without institutionalism or sectarianism. It's not an institution, not religion as institution, but religion as a way of the self, how we live in the most realistic way or based on truth. So how this self can live or should live, that is the way, or that is what Buddha taught. And he introduced three kind of a basic way of life in modern society. And he introduced finally a fourth way of life as a bodhisattva path or practice. So in a sense, when I talked about Menzan's discussion about Persimmon, he said there are four types of people, or four ways of life. One is people who are born and do evil karma, bad karma, and go to hell. And another is born and doing good deeds and be born in the heaven. And the third is a person who want to leave that realm of good and bad of samsara and want to enter nirvana. And the fourth is bodhisattva way of life, to without not escaping from samsara, but work within samsara together with all beings and find and create nirvana within samsara. Those are kind of four types of way of life or people according to Mahayana teaching. And I think what Okumura Roshi is trying to do is to put the bodhisattva way of life in the, how can I say, modern society, not within the Buddhist teachings like Menzan did. So he picked up three types of attitude or way of life. That is what he is saying in the next paragraph. Probably the vast majority of the 4 billion people, this talk was given 30 years ago, I think 1977. At that time, the number of living human beings are 4 billion people. And now I think we have 60, right? No, 6 billion. So within last 30 years, number of human beings increased so rapidly. So anyway, the vast majority of 4 billion people in the world today live only in terms of pursuing material happiness. In thinking about their lives, most people devote almost all their energies to the pursuit of material happiness or health or prosperity. In contrast to that is the way of life in which we look to some absolute to be the authority for our life, depending on a God or some idea to validate our life, our way of life. A third approach is to search for some sort of permanent philosophical truth. But so often what we find is something that has little or no connection to ourselves as individuals. So he picked up three types of way of life. The first one is kind of a very common way of life in modern society, and this is also, in a sense, a world of transmigration, but it's kind of different from the Buddhist version of transmigration within 6 realms of samsara. Because transmigration in Buddhism is caused by ethics or morality. If we do bad thing or immoral deed, we go to hell or other kind of difficult realms like hell or the realm of hungry ghost or animal. But if we do a good deed, then we go up to be born in a human. No, first was Ashura or fighting spirit, and human beings and heavenly beings, depending upon the quality of our actions, whether it's good or bad, or wholesome or unwholesome. But in the case of modern society, we go up or down, depending upon whether we are talented or not, whether we are well educated or not, whether we are strong or not. If we are strong and talented and well educated, we can go up to the top of the society. Otherwise, we have to stay low class. So it's not really based on this, transmigration or movement. It's not really morality, but more like a capability. But kind of the same thing. And in modern society, we, especially this, materialistic world or society, we pursue, especially money, because if we have money, we can, gain or purchase almost everything. So money can be most important. This is the first type of the life in modern world, to chase the happiness we can gain through material things, or health or prosperity. And this was really strong in Japan after the second half of 19th century, because in order to catch up with European countries, Japanese government want to make Japan a strong and prosperous or rich country. So Japanese government encourage Japanese people to work hard and make more money and become strong. For 300 years, since beginning of 17th century until end of 19th century, almost 300 years, Japan was close to the rest of the world. And Japanese population didn't change for those 300 years. Around 30 million. And probably I think that was a limit of the number of people live in those islands, based on the technology of cultivating the field. That means the production of food. But after Meiji Restoration that happened in the end of 19th century, the population of Japan, I think, become 4 times more within 100 years. And finally, last year, it started to decrease. So within about 100 years, the population became 4 times more. Not many people came from outside. So that means those people were born in Japan because of the policy of the Japanese government to make Japan, strong and prosperous or rich country. they need soldiers and workers. So, that society, materialistic society, was kind of based on our desire to be strong and rich. And at least Okumura Roshi didn't like that kind of way of life. And second is absolute, in contrast to that is the way of life in which we look to some absolute to be the authority for our life. So instead of fulfilling our desire to be powerful and rich or famous, we depend or rely on something absolute like a God. So this looks opposite from the way of life to pursue the power and prosperity. That is a second type of life, according to Okumura Roshi. And third approach is to search for some sort of permanent philosophical truth. Actually, those three are the way of life Okumura Roshi, actually encountered or experienced. When he was a teenager, he wanted to find a truth and wanted to live based on that truth. That's why he started to study Western philosophy. And also he studied Christianity. But when he was a university student, his father was a businessman, and his father had a company, but that company, his father's company, was bankrupt when Okumura Roshi was a university student, and he experienced the change. When his father or his family had money, and after they lost that money, people's attitude toward his father and his family changed, and he didn't like that change. So at that time he made determination, I will never worship money. That was the main reason he didn't like the first type of life. So he mainly was interested in pursuing the truth through philosophical thinking. And also he studied Catholic theology. So actually the first type was modern, kind of a common people in Japanese society at the time he was young. And second was Christian, actually, in his experience. Also not only Christianity, but Islam and other religion rely on some absolute authority. Not only that kind of religion, but also for certain group of people, certain idea or philosophy had absolute authority. Like for example, communist countries. There aren't many communist countries now, but in the 20th century there were some, many communist countries, and within those communist countries, communism had absolute authority. That kind of life. And he said he couldn't live in that way. So he pursued the truth through studying philosophy, but somehow he departed from that path and started to study and practice Buddhism. Next paragraph. Now, in terms of these three ways of life, where does Buddhism fit in? Actually, it doesn't fit into any of them. So according to Okumura Roshi, Buddhist practice or Bodhisattva way doesn't fit in any of those three types of life or approaches toward life. To explain why, I'd like to return briefly to the story of my own youth. When I was in middle school, I never gave a thought to pursuing happiness materialistically. That always seems meaningless to me. And the second lifestyle, that of setting up and obeying some sort of supreme authority, never appealed to me either. I could never get myself to believe in a great being and just follow along. That left the third alternative, searching after truth. When I studied Western philosophy in college and graduate school, searching for a great truth, that what struck me about this search was the way in which it was undertaken. The tradition of pursuing philosophical truth down through the Greek and German traditions required an extraordinary kind of passion. This kind of passion had no connection to your daily life, which had no value whatever with regard to truth. It was supposed to be enough just to discover an abstract truth, but the daily reality of living that existed apart from and in contrast to philosophical truth continued to be a problem for me. So finally, although I learned a great deal from it, I could never get myself to throw my whole life into a philosophical pursuit of truth. So he studied Western philosophy at a university and a graduate school. He majored German philosophy, especially I think Hegel. It was big system of philosophy. And yet he had a kind of a problem. I think this problem was same as so-called existentialist had. About for example, Kierkegaard. Is this pronunciation okay? Kierkegaard, the philosopher born in Denmark. He criticized Hegel's system of philosophy, and I don't quite remember because I read Kierkegaard many years ago. But he said within the system Hegel's system of philosophy, everything is there except me, except this person who is actually living. And I think Okumura Roshi had the same question toward that kind of philosophy. So Hegel's philosophy is, objective and universal, and everything is included within that philosophy. But within that philosophy, the person who actually living day by day with so many problems, and especially as I said before, when I talked about Okumura Roshi's life, he studied philosophy, but he also had many kind of tragic experiences. He married twice in his 20s. He first married with a woman, very elegant, beautiful woman, when he was, I think, 21 or 2. He was a university student, and he, lived together with his first wife for 4 years. But before he finished graduate school, the first wife died because she had TB. And actually, Okumura Roshi transmitted TB from his first wife, and he lived with TB rest of his life. And when he finished the graduate school, he became a teacher at a Catholic seminary. He taught mathematics and philosophy. And he also studied Catholic theology there. And he had some intention to become a Catholic priest. But after 6 months, he found it not possible for him because of, institutionalism in Catholic. So he quit that job after 6 months. And he said that 6 months was only time he had a regular job and regular income. Anyway, so he went back to Tokyo from Kyushu, and he married again. And his second wife also died about 1.5 years later after their marriage, when she was pregnant. So he had a very tragic experience, and he had some sense of guilty toward the death of his 2 wives. I don't know exactly what was the cause of his sense of guilty, but probably because he was so enthusiastic to search the truth. Maybe he didn't so much take about their wives, his wives. Somehow that kind of problem was not, solved by studying philosophy. That was his problem inside of himself, and he couldn't. He finally thought he couldn't live without, finding some way to find the true way of this self who has a problem, not a objective universal truth. That was not what he needed. What he needed, how he could live with this, body and mind, and who has a problem inside. So I think he had the same kind of question that Kierkegaard had toward Hegel's philosophy. So he said, I could never get myself to throw my whole life into a philosophical pursuit of truth. Especially, for Japanese people to study Western philosophy, first thing they had to study was language, Western language. In the case of German philosophy, he first had to study, German. So it's really difficult. It takes time, take a lot of energy to first study language and study, philosophical, writings, and think about it, and think in Japanese and write in Japanese. So basically, what Japanese philosophers after Meiji have been doing is introducing Western philosophers' thought. Not many Japanese philosophers, established their own philosophy. They just introduce Western thought to Japanese people. So basic work they have been doing was translation. Translate, German or English or French philosophical text into Japanese and make commentaries. Only so-called Japanese philosopher who kind of not established, but made their own or his own philosophy was Nishida Kitaro, the kind of a philosopher or founder of so-called Kyoto School of Japanese Japanese philosophy. He was a professor at Kyoto University, and this person, Nishida Kitaro, was considered to be the first Japanese philosopher who really, think in his own way. Of course, he studied mainly German philosophy, but he kind of combined Western philosophy and Zen. And he was the very close friend of D.T. Suzuki. And Nishida's philosophy and D.T. Suzuki's Zen teaching was very close. So if Uchiyamura stayed in the world of philosophy, probably he became a existentialist. But somehow he couldn't stay in that area, so he left and he entered the world of practice. Next paragraph. Pursuing truth was certainly the backdrop for the kind of life I wanted to live, but not truth in the sense of some sort of absolute, divorced from reality. In other words, when we talk about some ideal truth or the way something should be in its ideal state, we can't help but feel a contradiction between that and the reality of what we are. My departure point was to move to the very edge of this contradiction, and from there to find a truth that was undeniably real. So he quit to search the truth in philosophy. But in this translation, it used the word contradiction. Contradiction between the philosophical or objective truth and actual reality of ourselves, our life. But I don't think contradiction is the right word. This is a kind of a separation. It's not contradicted, but the way we are, who we are, and the way we should be as our objective truth is separate, and it's not. I don't think it's contradicted. What do you think? Do you think so? It's two different kind of reality.
I can't think of a word, but I think
right.
your explanation is accurate, or feels right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Anyway, so next paragraph he mentioned about a little bit about Christianity. In the New Testament, Saint Paul, talks about the struggle between the form of what ought to be and the longing or voice of one's own body. That is one area in which I always felt a connection with Christianity. Although I never came to believe in God in that Christian sense, I did feel strongly Paul's words concerning this struggle between body and spirit. In the end note of this book, it said this Okumura Roshi referred to Paul's words in Romans 7:9, but I don't think that was the praise. But I checked. I think Romans 7:14 to 24. I think this is very well-known sayings of Saint Paul. So I think if you are familiar with Christianity or Bible, you already know. Saint Paul said, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am of the flesh, F-L-E-S-H, flesh body, sold into slavery under sin. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate." So St. Paul said, I cannot do what I should do or what I want to do, but somehow I do something I don't really want to, or even I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. That means the law is good, but I'm not good. I'm bad, the law is good, but I cannot really completely follow the law. But in fact, it is no longer I that do it, but sin, S-I-N, sin that dwells with me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. So my will or my intention and my action are contradicted. We cannot do what we think we should do or we want to do. So this separation or contradiction within the self. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. kind of complicated. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do what is good, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inmost self, but I see in my members another law at war with the law of my mind, making me making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will rescue me from this body of death? I think this is St. Paul's words Okumura Roshi is referred to. So, this kind of a separation or this or the self is torn into two parts and have struggle within the self. I want to do good things, or I want to follow the law of God, and yet I cannot. This kind of problem was, I think Okumura Roshi had same kind of problem, and that this kind of problem cannot be solved by find the objective truth like in the Western philosophy. It's more like a spiritual or religious or practical, very practical problem. And I'd like to introduce another sayings of Saint Paul. I think this might be an answer to Saint Paul found to that problem. This appeared in Galatians 3:19. Said, "For through the law I died to the law, so that I might live to God." I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but it is Christ who lives in me. In Romans he said, it's not me, but the sin do this, evil thing. But here Paul said, it's not me, but Christ lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So there's some kind of transformation within St. Paul between these two, sayings. Although Okumura Roshi didn't have a faith in God, in Christian sense, but I think he needs some kind of transformation like St. Paul had. So it cannot be, given by logical, conceptual thinking, but he needs some practice. And Christianity was not his way. He found he couldn't be a Christian. So the fourth possibility for him to search that kind of truth or reality is Buddhism. At that time in my life, that time means when he was a teenager, wanted to find a truth. But at that time in my life, I really didn't have a deep enough understanding to come out with a clear definition of truth in the philosophical sense. I didn't know what it was, but I was convinced that it was by truth or in truth that I wanted to live out my life. Gradually, a feeling grew inside me that the way I was searching for was very close to that talked about in the Buddhist teachings. And so I began to look for deeply into the Buddha way. Finally, I became a monk. It is only after 40 years of Buddhist practice that I finally feel I can begin to give a clear definition of truth. So he found the truth he was looking for after many years. And when he gave this talk, he was, I think, almost 70 years old. After 40 years of practice, now he could give a very clear definition of the truth he was looking for, and he found. That was what he is going to talk. So, until here is a kind of a introduction of what he is going to present as a sweet persimmon. And of course, that is, Buddha's teaching. So now we start to talk, I mean, not me, but Uchiyamura start to talk on Buddha's teaching. What the Buddha's teaching is different or unique, different from those three types of, approach toward life. So next section, he talks about a very basic teaching of Buddhism, or Buddha's teaching, using the four seals. Four seals is a translation, Shi, Ho, In. Shi is four, and Ho is dharma, and In is a translation of mudra. When we sit in the Zen, we hold our hands like this. This is called mudra. And there are many different mudras. And in this case, this mudra is like a seal in English. You know what seal is? When we write a letter and envelope. In ancient times, they make a seal with wax, that kind of seal. And in Chinese or Japanese, same as stamp. Still today, in Japanese society, stamp is really important. And when we do some legal actions, we have to use certain stamps of our name, and that we should use the registered stamp. We register this stamp to the town office, and when we do a legal action, we have to use that stamp. That means if in certain document, if we find that this stamp, that means this person really agreed with this interaction. So to make a contract, we need a stamp, registered stamp. And if you find someone's stamp on a calligraphy or paintings, that is a kind of a certification. This painting or calligraphy was made by that person. So, stamps or seal is, in Chinese or Japanese culture, is like a signature in American society. So if you have a signature, that means you have responsibility. So this in or seals means if those 4 points, if we find those 4 points in someone's teachings, then we can consider that teaching is Buddhism. So this in is more like a logo of something. So if we found those four points in someone's teaching, we can judge or make judgment. This teaching is Buddhism. If we cannot, this is something else. So that's what this in or seal means. So in any Buddhist teachings, we find those 4 points. So this is a really basic point of Buddhist teachings. And I have read this section many times, but probably because this was not written by him, by Okumura Roshi, but this is a record of his talk. The kind of his sequence or order of his discussion is not so clear. So today I'd like to talk about those 4 dharma seals based on my own understanding. And tomorrow I'm going to start to read Okumura Roshi's discussion. Those 4 points are: first one is everything is suffering. Second is everything is impermanent. Third is everything is egoless or self-egoless or non-substantial. And the fourth is nirvana, is, what is the word? Tranquility, calmness? Mm-hmm. What is the best word?
I think you use one word, quiescence.
Quiescence. Okay, whatever word you like. Same thing. Those 4. I think if you read any Buddhist text, you will find those 4 points: suffering and impermanence, egolessness or no substance, and nirvana is quiescence. And my understanding of these 4 dharma seals is not, these 4 are not 4 independent items, but this is a kind of a message from the Buddha to us. That means, second and third dharma seal is reality of our life. And if we don't see this reality, if we don't awaken to this reality of impermanence and egolessness, our life becomes suffering. And if we really see, awaken to this reality and live based on this reality, our life becomes nirvana. It's a very simple message. But it said everything is suffering. This everything is important. Everything is suffering. Because of this teaching, some people think Buddhism is nihilistic or pessimistic, but it's not really. But I think it means if we don't awake to the reality of impermanence and egolessness, and we cling to our ego, and we think our ego is permanent and most important. And in the Buddhist definition, ego or Atman means that something is not change. It's not impermanent, it's permanent. And we cling to this Atman or ego as me. And this is most important. And to make this ego, powerful and healthy, keep healthy and wealthy, and make that desire came from our ego, became the purpose of my life. If we live on that basis, our life becomes suffering. Everything in our life becomes suffering. That means within this everything, even happiness, joy, or good fortune, or wealth, or health, all, not only the negative side, but also positive side. And like when we are in the heavenly beings in 6 realms means the people whose desire are completely satisfied. Even we live in that way, still our life is suffering. And more often we cannot live in that way. We are transmigrating within 6 realms, and this within this transmigration there's no end. So we cannot stay certain condition forever, because it's impermanent. Everything is changing. So even we have everything we want, everything we wish or desire, still sometimes we have to lose. That means we have fear that soon or later we lose this. And because of this fear, we want to, save more and more to secure our life. So that means our desire has no limit. There's no time we can be really satisfied. So we want to more, and that makes us as a hungry ghost. We want more, and yet we cannot be satisfied. Even though our stomach is full, we cannot satisfy it. Cats can be satisfied and completely happy when their stomach is full and they just sleep. But we cannot. Even though our stomach is full, we have to think about tomorrow, about 10 years later, about even after my death, and we worry how can make things, safe and in order. That is a problem for us. So if we live being blind in this reality of impermanence and egolessness, and if we live to satisfy our desires, even the happiness or success or joy is a part of suffering, because we cannot really be satisfied. So not only the negative side of our life, even the positive side of our life is a part of our suffering, dissatisfaction. I think that is what everything suffering means. But Buddha also said it's possible to change, to make change. If we awake to the reality of impermanence and egolessness and live based on this reality, the goal or purpose of our life cannot be satisfy our ego-centered desire. In that, and when we try to live together with all beings and support and help each other, even the difficulties or painful experiences we have to work on is a part of our practice, part of our practice to fulfill or based on Bodhisattva vow. So we don't need to live to fulfill our desires. And if we, even when our desires are not completely fulfilled, still we can be, calm, quiet, peaceful. That is what nirvana means. So nirvana is different from the condition of heavenly beings. That means all desires are fulfilled. But the peacefulness in nirvana is not because our desires are all satisfied. But we can find peacefulness even when our desires are not fulfilled. So it's not depend on our conditions. No, in whatever condition we can find that peacefulness. That is nirvana. So it's not conditioned. Nirvana is not conditioned. So we need to find that peacefulness. And that is nirvana. This is a basic teaching or a message from the Buddha that is depending upon basic reality we can live in two opposite ways. One is based on our ego-centered desire, and our life becomes suffering. And when we awake to that reality and try to live based on this reality, then even within difficulties we can find peacefulness. That is nirvana. And another very basic teaching of Buddha was, of course, as you know, Four Noble Truths. In Four Noble Truths, Buddha teach what is the cause of this suffering. And he said, desires. And so this is the first noble truth. Everything is suffering. And second is the cause of suffering. That is desires or thirst. And the third noble truth is nirvana, or cessation of suffering. So Buddha taught it's possible, we experience cessation of suffering. And the cause for cessation of suffering is eightfold noble path or correct path. That is our practice. So this is really basic teaching of Buddhism. And all different kind of teachings in different tradition or schools of Buddhism came from this basic structure of Buddha. So one of the most important point of Buddhist philosophy is how this cause and result happens. And most well-known teaching about the cause of this cause and result is 12 links of causation. And also in Yogacara school, they discussed how our life becomes suffering. In order to explain that, they kind of created the teaching of Araya consciousness, the deepest consciousness. And yet, the seventh consciousness above Araya consciousness. Araya consciousness was eighth consciousness, and seventh was so-called manas, or mana consciousness. And this mana consciousness is ego-centered consciousness, and calling the Araya consciousness as me. And this seventh consciousness controls first six consciousnesses. First six means consciousness caused by our five sense organs. That means eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, and mind. The sixth was mind consciousness. That is our, usual thinking mind or discriminating mind. That is a kind of explanation how our life becomes suffering in Mahayana teachings. And in the teachings of Madhyamika school, they focus on seeing the reality of impermanence and egolessness instead of cause and result. So they discuss and emptiness is a key word to explain, not explain, what is the word? To deeply see into this reality, and express or explain this reality, they invented this kind of a concept named emptiness. And of course, all Buddhism need to practice in order to go to nirvana or actualize this cessation of suffering. So this is very basic teaching of almost all Buddhism, Buddhist teachings and practice. And in the case of Dogen's teaching, or in our tradition, or in Zen in general, the point is in other, Buddhist teachings, there are many stages from kind of in the process of transformation from this side to this side. In the early Buddhist teaching, there are 4 stages. And in Mahayana teaching, there are 52 stages. From first, we allow bodhicitta or body-mind and start to practice, study dharma and practice, and actually arrive at nirvana. It needs to go through 52 stages, and it takes more than forever. But what Zen want to say is we can make this transformation in one moment, in one kind of a jumping, through one jump we can enter nirvana. That was Zen teaching, and that was a kind of attractive, was attractive for Chinese people. Probably because Chinese people didn't really believe in transmigration or rebirth. So they want to see the result within this lifetime. That's why they need the teaching of sudden enlightenment. And what then teachers said is when you are free from discrimination or thinking, or the cause of this discrimination, this problem is caused by our thinking, by our discrimination. When we stop thinking, we are really free from our thinking, then we become one with this reality. And this reality is itself nirvana. So when we become free from thinking, then we, with one jump, we can enter nirvana without, going through 52 stages. That was the basic teaching of Zen. In Dogen's teaching, these two sides, go directly enter nirvana in one jump and practice forever, eternally, is kind of combined. That means that is the basis of his teaching of practice and enlightenment are one. That means when we start this practice, we are already within nirvana, because our practice is itself nirvana. Our practice of letting go without any expectation, and we just sit, and that is nirvana. This practice cannot be caused by our desire, cannot be activity to seek some desirable result, but we really just sit this moment completely. And this Zazen practice itself is nirvana or enlightenment. And yet we need to keep this practice endlessly. So there's no goal. We are already in the goal, but we need to continue this practice endlessly. That is Dogen's teaching and our practice. Well, anyway, it's almost 10:30. Any question? Please.
I was thinking that I did not think my way here
Mm-hmm.
in my life.
Mm-hmm.
People say to me or ask me why I became Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, there was no thinking involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, my life unfolded in such a way that I met you,
Mm-hmm.
and it made just sense to me to take the next step into Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no decision for me.
Mhm.
It just made sense.
Mm-hmm.
It was a continuation of my life.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't think our way here,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't think our way there
Mm-hmm.
to nirvana, isn't it just evolution then? Isn't it just an evolution of that non-substantialness?
Well, I think there are many different cases.
Uh-huh.
For some people, because of certain, like Okumura Roshi's very tragic experiences, he had to make decision. He had to make choice. But for some people, it can be a very natural, gradual process, and without make such a sudden decision. People can kind of naturally, come to this way. So I think there are many different cases. Okay.
Could you? Okay.
Okay. Are you okay about that question?
Just another, where or in what book does it explain the 12 links of causation that leads to suffering?
I think it's explained in the book What Buddha Taught.
What Buddha taught.
Is it? Do you know? Do you remember? Is it only for Four Noble Truths?
I think so.
I think many of the books on early Buddhist teachings mention 12 links of causation.
There was a book you loaned me that was by a Japanese author, Basic Buddhist Teachings.
Mizuno.
Mm-hmm. That had.
That might be a good book. Do you remember the title of the book?
I think Basic Buddhist Teachings was.
Basic Buddhist Teachings by his name is Kogen Mizuno. He was very well-known Japanese Buddhist scholar who mainly studied Pali, and he died last year, and he was more than 100 years old. I studied with him when I was a university student. He was already old. He was already retired from one school. So I think his book is very good. Anything else? Please.
I think I remember reading in, I think it was the Teaching of Homeless Kodo,
Mm-hmm.
and there was one quote where he talked about the Indian, the cycle of transmigration, the idea of the heavenly beings,
Mm-hmm.
and you related it kind of like you did to modern life, in saying that the heavenly beings were like
Mm-hmm.
the rich people, the people on the top of our society.
Right.
Do you think that when the Buddha was teaching, that kind of idea was kind of a way of looking at society, of how we want to top and how there's people at the bottom and there's the fighting spirits and all these different kind of cultures of people or different. It seems kind of similar, but maybe different.
I'm not sure, but probably so. I mean, when Buddha was alive, that was a time, before the time of Buddha. India was divided into very small communities like tribes or villages. But around the time of Buddha, all those independent community was kind of united into a kingdom. And Shakya clan was very small but peaceful. They had a peaceful kingdom, but there are larger kingdom like Kosala or Magadha, and they are fighting each other. And within that process of kind of creating a big country, there are many different in the word used in India was for Indian society was caste or classes were separated, and in a sense, in order to explain why these class distinction within society were there, and in a sense to justify that classification or discrimination, they create a kind of idea of rebirth. That means because you did certain things, you have to spend difficult life in this lifetime, and because the person did very good things, therefore they were born in a high class in this lifetime and can spend a happy life. That kind of explanation, I think. So the realms in samsara is not only 6, but there must be numberless conditions, and we have to experience that changes. So I don't, Japanese people don't really believe transmigration, life after life. That is a kind of Indian folk belief. But because it's we accept as a Buddhist teachings, I think no Buddhist really officially negated the idea of rebirth. But we Japanese really don't believe that transmigration like Indian people, because as a folk belief in Japan, we had a kind of a sense that there is a place for dead people, and these two are kind of next to each other. And our ancestor, when after death, their death, they go to that kind of a place, and they can come back a few times a year to visit this world. That is a kind of a ancestor worship. It's still practiced in Japanese Buddhism. That's why in Japanese Buddhist temples, there are kind of a name plate of all the ancestors. If we transmigrate or reverse in Indian way, the person who lived with that name was reborn and doing something else. So it's kind of nonsense, meaningless to keep their names and worship or visit certain times a year, because they are they continue, reincarnation or transmigration. But, Japanese Buddhists never question about this idea, and we practice, based on Japanese belief of next, not next, but life after death. And it's different from Indian idea. So I don't really believe in this, idea, teaching of transmigration from, from previous life to this life and this life to next life. So we are not a good Buddhist. But it doesn't matter to me. I mean, we can see transmigration within this lifetime. As far as we are living based on our desire or three poisonous mind, we transmigrate with many different conditions, almost moment after moment. And the teaching of this transmigration within samsara is also valid, I think. Even if we don't believe, reverse from, from previous life to this life and to this life to the next life, this is a problem in Buddhist teaching. If, we really transmigrate from previous life to this life and this life to next life, what is transmigrating is a very famous question. If there's no soul or Atman, what is really transmigrating? And there's no, there are many explanations, but I don't think any of them are successful. So this is still a kind of a question. If there's no Atman or soul, what is, transmigrate? But to me, without, assuming we are transmigrate from previous life to this life and this life to next life, we can understand the meaning of this, teaching of transmigration within 6 realms, I think. And the point that Buddhist teachers keep this idea of transmigration instead of negate or discontinue is, and this idea of rebirth is a kind of a basis of morality or ethics in Buddhism. That means if we do bad thing, we will be born in bad place. If we do good thing, we will be born in good place. Is a kind of a skillful means to teach people to live in a ethical, moralistic way. But I don't think today we don't need that kind of skillful means. Please.
The longer you talk, the more pieces of this question appear.
So better to stop it.
I'll have answers. So I was going to say, like, transmigration could be seen as, implying a permanent self, but I've heard a version of it that doesn't do that, which seems okay to me, I think. But the other question is, if you actually think that when people die they go somewhere, how do you do that without having a permanent self?
That's the question.
Okay.
And there are many explanations, but I think none of those explanations are successful. There are, in Tibetan Buddhism, they really believe the reincarnation, And there are some explanations, but there's no basis we can, think or believe that is true or not, because we don't know. We have no memory about the previous life, and we cannot see the future life. Only thing we can see is this present life. So there's no basis to negate reincarnation or rebirth. So I don't negate it, but I also have no basis to believe it. So I don't believe it, but I don't negate it. I think that was Buddha's answer. Yep. Please.
Where did Dogen come down on that question? How did he deal with it, or how did he say?
Well, in his main teachings, like in Shobogenzo, he never discussed about transmigration, but he focused on this moment or this lifetime, how you live in this moment is more important. But he didn't negate, reverse. Actually, there's one chapter of Shobogendo. He said, we may, after our death, the period before we are born, next life, after 49 days, during 49 days, we stay certain place. I forget the name.
Is it the Bardo?
Bardo, yes. He write about that, and he said we should keep. What did he say? Maybe chanting the name of Buddha, or chant.
Refuge. I just
Yeah.
read this.
Yeah, taking
Read your writing on it.
3 refuges, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So it seems I'm not sure he believed, or at least he didn't negate that teaching. Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you.